Hey guys, my name is Rachel and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome to my channel. So before we get into today's video, I just wanted to say that we hit 10,000 subscribers here on this channel, and I literally can't even believe that I'm even saying that. I honestly thought that I would never get anywhere near 10,000 subscribers on this channel, so the fact that we just hit 10,000 just feels unreal to me, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who has taken the time to watch my videos, subscribe to my channel, and share these cases that we cover here on this channel. I am so grateful for each and every one of you, and from the bottom of my heart, I cannot thank you guys enough for being here and supporting me and supporting every single person that we talk about here on this channel. So with that being said, with so many new subscribers here, I decided that I would go ahead and share a little bit about myself. I'm going to do the classic YouTuber 10K Q&A, so if there's any questions that you have for me, anything that you would like to know about, anything that you're curious about, I'm going to create a community post and an Instagram post for you to go ahead and comment all of your questions. Literally go ahead and ask me anything. Nothing's off limits. Anything you're curious about, go ahead and ask me. I will be taking questions for about a week, so make sure you go ahead and follow me on Instagram at RachelShannonYt, or go ahead and find that community post if you have any questions for me. All right, with that being said, let's just jump right into today's case. So today's case is another one of those cases of a rocky relationship turning into a hostile environment for the children. All too often, we hear about two parents going through a rocky divorce or going through something else in their relationship, and for one reason or another, both parents decide to use their children to get revenge or to get back at one another. It's absolutely devastating and immature for parents to do this, and I just wish parents could keep their issues between them, but that's not always the case. So the case that we are going to be going over today involves a possible situation of a parent trying to get revenge on the other parent, but it could also be a possible situation of a parent genuinely trying to get their children away from a lifetime of abuse from the other parent. And it's honestly just based on what theory you choose to believe. This case reminds me a lot of the Timothy Pitson case, and it's a little bit more black and white than this case because we know that Timothy's mother took him away from his father, and we know that there's no sign of abuse, there's no sign of any sort of negative history in terms of the parents towards the children. But in this case, it's possible that there is some sort of abuse going on, and again, it's just based on what you want to believe. With that being said, today we are going to be talking about the unsolved disappearance of the Skelton brothers. Andrew Alexander and Tanner are three brothers who lived with their parents, Tanya Lynn Zuvers and John Russell Skelton, in a small town in Michigan called MORENCI. At the time of their disappearance, Andrew was 9 years old, Alexander was 7 years old, and Tanner was just 5 years old. Andrew was described as being too smart for his own good. He was so good at video games and computer games that any time he played against anyone, he always knew that he would win, and he did. He did great in school, he got good grades, and of all the three boys, he was the most timid and quiet. If he wanted to ask you something, he would sit on your lap, tap you, and tell you that he has a question. He was just such a sweet, kind young boy. Alexander was described as the daredevil of the three. He loved jumping his bike, climbing, racing, and just getting into the dirt, and he was always getting into trouble. He loves spraying his brothers with the hose and just being a little boy. When he's not getting into trouble and playing in the dirt, he's a complete lover. He will sit on your lap, love on you, watch TV, and will just sit there and talk to you. And last but not least, adorable little Tanner was described as a storyteller of the three. He had a crazy imagination and would go all out and tell you these crazy stories, then at the very end say something like, "That didn't really happen, I was just pulling your leg." He was so hilarious, he was a lover, he's cuddly, and gets jealous really fast when someone else is getting all the love and attention. He always makes sure that his presence is known, and he really looks up to all of his siblings. He always just tried to keep up with them and whatever they were doing, and again, he was just a sweet little boy with a big heart. Now, the information on this family's background is a little bit mixed up and confusing because it's all just kind of word of mouth and he said, she said type of things. So according to Tanya, they had a very good family life. Tanya loved being a mother and said that her boys were her absolute world. Tanya and John got married, and a year later she was pregnant with her first child. It was her dream to be a mother, and she said that she loved every second of it. They seemed to have a great home life. They seemed to be the picture perfect family, until things started getting a little bit rocky in Tanya and John's relationship. In September of 2010, Tanya and John's marriage was on its last legs, and Tanya wanted a divorce. They wanted to live in separate homes, and they were in the process of doing so. So in the month of September of 2010, there were a few weird things that happened. So I'm going to get into the complete timeline of everything that happened. On Monday, September 13th, 2010, Tanya took her boys to school for the day. It was pretty normal. She dropped them off on time in the morning, dropped them off with their medicine just like any other day. John said that he was leaving to go to work. However, instead, he actually went to the boys' school around noon and picked them up. He told the school that he's picking up the children early because they're leaving for vacation. His parents actually lived in Jacksonville, Florida, so he said that they were going to drive over there. However, the school thought this was weird, so they called Tanya to tell her that John just picked up the boys from school. Again, when Tanya dropped them off, she had dropped off their medicine. She hadn't said anything about any vacation or picking up the boys early. So Tanya decided to call John, figure out what was going on, but at this point, John and the boys were in the car, still in Michigan, but they were on their way to Florida. At first, John tells Tanya that the boys and him are going on a 3-week vacation. He said that he's going to be putting the boys in school once they're down there, but of course, that was extremely odd. Why would you take your boys on this random 3-week vacation right after school started? And if it were just a vacation, why are you going to enroll your kids in a brand new school? So Tanya went ahead and called her lawyer to tell him what was going on, and Tanya's lawyer told her that the only way to prevent the kids from leaving the state was to file a divorce and request emergency custody of the children. So she did this, and the judge granted her emergency custody. However, before he was served the papers, he figured out what was going on and he hurried the boys back into the car. But this time he was only able to get Alexander and Andrew to go with him, so he left Tanner at home with Tanya and took the other 2 boys to Florida. The next day, when they were in Florida, the older boys called their mother. After they got off the phone with her, Tanya immediately headed to Jacksonville, Florida, and the police got involved, who then went ahead and served John the custody order. After this, they met with a judge, all still in Florida. The judge told the parents that they had joint custody of the boys as they were driving home. So when they were outside of Michigan, they had joint custody. But once they reached Michigan, Tanya had the full custody. So as all this was going on, they were driving back, and it was about a week until they got back to Michigan and Tanya had full custody. So this entire thing was extremely weird. Now, by November 20th, the parents are officially living separately, but the homes are extremely close to one another. They're only about 2 blocks away, but Tanya is just completely done with this whole relationship. She thinks it's best for everyone if she has full custody of the boys and if her and John just stay separated. However, John is still wanting to get back with Tanya, according to her, and just trying to work things out. He also said that his boys needed to see their father and he still deserved to visit them. So again, Tanya was just not having it when it came to getting back together with John, but she still believed that her sons needed their dad, who they loved very much, and she didn't want to deny them time with their father. She really was just trying her best to make all of this easier on the children. She stayed in the same neighborhood so her children would still have their friends, and she continued to live in that neighborhood so they could see their father, who again didn't live very far away. So at this point, after some talking back and forth, Tanya agreed to let John have the boys for Thanksgiving. Now, on November 24th, 2010, so the day before Thanksgiving, the boys were at Tanya's parents' house in the afternoon until John was going to come pick them up at 5 p.m. that day. John came around 5 p.m. that day and they went over to his house. While they were there, John cooked them one of their favorite dinners, fried chicken. He baked them a cake, and he said they sat down and watched a karate movie together. Then on November 25th, Thanksgiving Day, Tanya was on the phone with John, and he was still asking if they could get back together. Tanya was kind of like, probably not, but on this phone call, she could hear the boys in the background having a good time, playing, things like that. The next day, November 26th, Black Friday, Tanya was supposed to pick up the boys from John's house around 3 p.m. However, that morning, the two spoke on the phone and sent text messages where Tanya asked John if she could come pick up the boys early around noon. John said that he would, but they weren't at home. Tanya was a little bit confused because, like I said earlier, the two lived extremely close together, and she could literally see his house from her house. And she could see that his van was still sitting in the driveway. So she told him, I can literally see that you're home. But John said that his friends actually came to pick them up and that they were all out having fun. But later, John said that the boys are actually with the friends and that John is at home and that the friend is going to drop them off at his house around 3 and then he would bring them to Tanya after that. But she's like, can't the friends just drop off the boys here or I'll just come get them? She was really confused at this point, but through the many conversations they had and the many times they spoke, they never actually agreed on a time for her to come get them or them to be dropped off. It was at this point that things really started to get weird. Now, after these conversations, the two spoke again, but this time, John told Tanya that he was actually on his way to the hospital because he thought that he had broken his leg. Of course, what Tanya is worried about at this point is her kids. She still doesn't know where they are. They haven't been dropped off and she has no idea what's going on. She asked John where the kids are and how is she going to get them, but John just said that the kids are still with his friends, that this friend was going to drop them back off at his or her house. She kept asking John if she could just contact this friend or if he could, but he kept saying that he didn't have this friend's phone number on him and that he didn't know how the boys were going to get to Tanya's house. This entire thing was just extremely confusing and Tanya had no idea what was going on. If this entire thing sounds like it doesn't make any sense to you, that's because it doesn't make any sense. As you can imagine, Tanya is just flustered at this point and just has had enough, so she got in contact with her attorney. The lawyer advised her to wait till after the drop-off time, so 3 p.m., to actually do anything. So she waited, and at exactly 3:01, Tanya called 911 to report Alex, Andrew, and Tanner as missing. So, like I said, John told Tanya that he was on his way to the hospital because he hurt his leg, and this was actually true. He had his friend drive him to the hospital for an ankle injury. Now, the way that John obtained this injury was apparently because he had actually attempted to take his own life by hanging either in the hotel room or at his home, but in the middle of this, he did not end up taking his life and only ended up with a broken or sprained ankle. So obviously, I'm not going to go into the logistics of how you can obtain a sprained ankle from this, but you can use your imagination. You probably can figure that out. But still, through all of this, John was adamant that his friend Joanne Taylor was supposed to return the boys to Tanya while he was in the hospital. John said that he had met Joanne and her husband while they were having car trouble and he stopped to help them. After this, they had maintained their friendship online. However, Tanya didn't believe this and thought her boys could be in grave danger. So, like I said, Tanya did report the boys missing right away, and the first place that police went was to search John's home to see if they could find the boys. They didn't find the boys at John's home, but what they did find was a bunch of broken stuff. There was broken furniture, a mattress had been slashed, and there was broken glass everywhere. That same night, an Amber Alert was sent out for Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner, and police started searching the neighborhood for the missing boys. The boys were thought to have been in extreme danger. Alexander was thought to have been last seen wearing black pajamas and a gray t-shirt. Tanner was last seen in a camouflage pajamas and a Scooby-Doo shirt, and Andrew was last seen in brown pajamas with orange trim. At 1:30 a.m. in the early mornings of Saturday, November 27th, police contacted Tanya to ask her to get to the police station as fast as possible to go over the details of the case with the local police before the FBI was going to get involved. As the searches were being done for the boys, the police began tracking John's cell phone data. They found that on Friday at 4:29 a.m., John's cell phone was about 3 miles away from his home on Congress Street and was moving. At 5 a.m., John's phone is near Holiday City, which is a small town in northwest Ohio near Michigan and Ohio's state borders. At 6:46 a.m., John's cell phone is actually back at his home. So essentially, John drove from his house to Holiday City, which is about a 30-minute straight shot, spent over an hour there, and then returned back to his home in the early morning hours. It's at this time when he's at home that he was talking on the phone and texting back and forth with Tanya, talking about the boys being with a friend and saying that they are not home. So it's at this point that it is believed that John attempted to take his own life, then called a friend to take him to the hospital after he obtained his ankle injury. So at this point, they are wondering where the boys are, when he could have dropped them off with Joanne Taylor, or if he even did. So at this point, everyone's wondering where the boys are, when he could have dropped them off with Joanne Taylor, who she even is, or if he even dropped them off to begin with. However, 3 days after the boys went missing, a woman reported to have seen all 3 boys in a donut shop in Sandusky, Ohio. The woman said that these 3 boys looked tired and hungry and like they didn't want to go into the shop. She had also said that the woman who was with these boys called one of them Tanner by name. The woman said that she didn't know about the boys who were missing until days later, and this is when she filed the report several days after the sighting. She said that the woman looked to be in her 40s, looked tired and disheveled, was about 5'4" and had dark hair. So we don't really know if it really was the boys, but it seemed very believable. Now, of course, at this point, investigators are starting to question John and figure out what exactly is going on. Like we said before, John's original story was that he left the boys with Joanne so she could drive them over to Tanya's house, but this time he admitted that he left them with Tanya because he wanted to take his own life and didn't want the boys to be around for that. But his story kept changing, and he later said that actually he gave the boys to an underground foster family because Tanya was abusing the boys. Now, like I said before, Tanya said that she absolutely loved being a mother and did nothing but love on her boys and treat them the absolute best that she could. But according to John, there's a lot more to the story that we don't know. So Tanya and John had both been married before they married each other. In John's previous marriage, he had 1 child. Tanya said that John knew that they were about to get a divorce and that Tanya would get full custody of the children because that's actually what happened in his previous marriage. He got divorced and the mother got the full custody of the child. In Tanya's previous marriage, she had 2 daughters who she was extremely close with. However, her first marriage actually ended because she had inappropriate relationships with a 14-year-old boy. She was charged and served time in prison and is a registered sex offender. However, before marrying John, Tanya said that John knew about this. She said that he knew about this from the very beginning and it wasn't a huge problem in their relationship. She said it was a mistake that she made and she served her time and hadn't done anything like that since. Now, in my opinion, I obviously don't think that she should just get a pass for this. I've heard some people say that it, was a 14-year-old boy, so it's not a big deal, that she's a woman and it's not a big deal, but in my opinion, I don't think that she should get a pass for this. I think that we should treat women and men in the same exact way when it comes to crimes against children, especially sexual crimes against children. So I 100% believe that what she did is completely disturbing, and I'm glad that she had to register as a sex offender. And I don't know the exact details of this entire thing, but I hope that she stays a sex offender the rest of her life. And I don't necessarily believe the whole "it was just a mistake" thing, because it was very intentional. What happened was intentional. She knew the boy's age. He was significantly younger than her. It was wrong, and we wouldn't give men a pass like this. We wouldn't say, oh, it was just a mistake. It was just a time in your life. So I do just want to point out that Tanya is a criminal and she did something horrible. But does that mean that she did the same thing to her children or that she was abusing them or anything like that? Not necessarily. But anyways, John was talking about this criminal conviction when he was talking about why he wanted to get the boys away from her. He said that she was abusing them, so he wanted to send them off with Joanne so that they didn't have to live a life of abuse at the hands of Tanya. Now, there's no physical evidence or a past history of Tanya abusing her sons. I don't really think there's anyone else that corroborated this. And again, this is just what John is claiming, but you never know either way. We don't really know what's happening behind the scenes since there are contradicting stories, so just keep that in mind as we continue on with this case. So at this point, I kind of want to be neutral. I don't think it's right that he sent his children off, but I also don't just automatically want to believe everything he's saying or what Tanya's saying. I don't know if she was abusing her children. They didn't show any signs, but they don't always show signs. It could have been mental abuse. It could have been physical abuse that no one noticed or saw. So again, we don't know. So after John got treated for his ankle injury, he is taken into police custody. While in custody, he spoke to his parents and told them everything that was going on. John's parents wholeheartedly believed everything that he had to say and actually said that John had told them about abuse previously, and that's why there was that whole incident of him taking the kids to Florida in the first place. However, on the other hand, police did not believe his story. Police were not able to find anyone by the name of Joanne Taylor, and they think that she doesn't even exist. They announced this to the public and announced that they believe that John may have done something to the children and thought that they believe they may be looking for bodies. One reason that police believe that John may have done something to the boys is because on November 24th, John wrote a Facebook message saying, "May God and Tanya forgive me." Now, as weird as this sounds, we don't actually know what this Facebook message means, and it doesn't necessarily point to him doing something to the kids, which we will get into more later. Another reason they believe that John could have done something to the children is because the night before the boys went missing, there were 2 searches done on John's computer. So, the first search on this computer was something along the lines of, "Can you break someone's neck with your hands?" But when John was asked about this, he had a very interesting explanation. Now, remember from before, as I mentioned, him and the boys were watching a karate movie. We don't exactly know which one, but of course a karate movie has a bunch of fighting scenes and action scenes where someone very may possibly have broken someone's neck with their bare hands. John said that while they were watching this movie, the kids were just in complete shock and disbelief and were like, "No, can you actually break someone's neck with your bare hands? Did this actually happen? Dad, is this possible?" And that's when he made the search. The next search on the computer that was done was something along the lines of, "Can rat poison kill a human?" So again, another very bizarre search. However, once again, when John was asked about this search, he said that while they were watching the movie, another person was killed by rat poisoning and the boys wanted to know if that too was possible, so he made the Google search. Now, I didn't necessarily find the exact times of these searches, but I wish we knew because that could be extremely telling of what was really going on when they were made. So if these searches were done before 5 or 6 p.m., we know that they were eating dinner around this time. So if they were eating dinner or about to eat dinner when these searches were made, it looks pretty bad in terms of him possibly poisoning the food that he was going to give to his children. If they were made later, around 7 or 8 possibly, that's probably around the time that they were watching the movie, so that makes the explanations a lot more likely. So of course, if the searches were made a lot later in the day, it does look a little bit better for him. So the last thing that led police to believe that John had something to do with this was something that John told his pastor. Now, while John was sitting in jail after all this happened, his pastor came and spoke with him, and when referring to the timeline, John said that there's this big black spot in his brain and it's almost like going into a black hole. It's another another cryptic message that we don't really know what it means. But in my opinion, I feel like this could point to him possibly harming the children, because we hear in a lot of these stories, someone said that they were completely blacked out and something took them over while they were doing this. You're committing such an atrocity against the children that you love. It makes sense that your body would just go into complete overdrive and then you'd black out. But again, there's no way of actually knowing what this message meant. Now, of course, while John was in prison, him and Tanya ended up finalizing their divorce, and John was charged with unlawful imprisonment of his children and was sentenced to 10 to 15 years behind bars. On February 1st, 2011, police announced that this is now a murder investigation. So that is the way they were starting to look at this case. In November of 2013, Monterey police turned their investigation over to the Michigan State Police. Now, 4 years later after that, there was a possible break in the case when partial remains were found in a shed on a rental property in Missoula, Montana. The owner of this property had been evicted the summer before they were discovered, and that when the cleaners went into the property to clean it, they discovered a box of partial remains from bone fragments and tooth fragments. Police started looking into the remains in December of that year. Police said that these remains could possibly belong to the boys. An anthropology professor at the University of Montana estimated the ages of these children who these fragments belonged to were 2 to 4 years old, 5 to 8 years old, and 6 to 10 years old, which matched up almost exactly with the ages of Tanner, Alexander, and Andrew. However, police also indicated that neither John or the boys had any connection to anyone in Montana, and as we discussed before, they tracked John's cell phone records that showed that he never left the state. So of course, to determine if these fragments could possibly belong to the boys, they would need to do some extensive forensic testing. They wanted to, of course, find out who these remains belonged to, but also determine a cause of death, which is extremely difficult with what they had. They were working with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, as well as other missing children organizations. They had no idea how these bones got there, where the bones originated from, what other cases these bones could possibly be connected to, and at this point, they didn't know a thing. So after these remains were found and police started pondering the idea of them being connected to Tanya's sons, Tanya went on Facebook to ask her friends for prayers. She said that they're still processing everything and that she's happy that there's at least movement in this case, and thanked everyone for their thoughts and prayers. So to do this testing, the remains were sent to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification for DNA testing. Of course, the testing that they did had to be pretty extensive, so it ended up taking about 6 months. So after 6 excruciating months of Tanya just having to sit idly by, wondering if these could possibly be her boys, she finally had some answers. They found out that these remains were actually more than 99 years old. The police came out and said that these remains were likely buried somewhere else for quite a bit before someone took them out of the ground, and then they ended up in the shed where they were found. So this was kind of devastating, yet a relief at the same time. While yes, it's a good thing that these remains were not the boys, it means that they may still be alive. At the same time, it kind of means that we're back at square one and Tanya has absolutely no idea what could have possibly happened to her sons. So at this point, once again, the case is at an absolute standstill. We have absolutely no idea what could have happened to these young boys, and their mother is still living every single day without her boys and having absolutely no idea what could have happened to them. It's been 8, almost 9 years, and we still have no idea what happened, which I think is incredibly selfish of John. He's the only person that knows exactly 100% what happened to these boys, yet here we are almost 9 years later and he has still refused to say anything. How selfish can you be? I understand that if he did do something to his boys that he doesn't want to get life in prison. I understand that if he did send them off with someone that they could be found and returned with their mother, who John claims was abusive. But at this point, Tanya deserves to know. I think that 9 years of absolute torture is long enough, and I don't know if Tanya was abusive towards the boys, or even if John is just a spiteful man who wanted to hurt his wife because she wanted to leave him. I just don't know, but she deserves to know what happened. So at this point, I'm going to get into the possible theories of what could have happened in this case. So the first main theory is that the boys are alive out there and John really did send them off somewhere to save them from an abusive mother, to save them from knowing that their father took his own life, or as revenge to Tanya for wanting a divorce and full custody. Now, there are multiple theories within this theory, so let's talk about the first possibility. The first theory within this theory is that everything that John said happened is true. Maybe he took the boys that morning. He dropped them off with this woman. This woman took them to some underground foster care system. John had alluded to the possibilities of the boys being in Michigan, Ohio, or Indiana, in a foster family in the Amish community or a Mormon community. Throughout his time in jail and speaking to different people about where his children could be, he mentioned the name, of course, Joanne Taylor, but he also named the names of Vigil, Sue, and Elijah, all as people who worked for this underground foster care system. These names have been put together through multiple stories that John has told, so maybe these boys were actually being abused. He knew these people somehow. He trusted them. Maybe he had been planning this entire thing for quite a while, and they are who he trusted to take the boys and care for them. There are a few things that could support this theory. So obviously we know that Tanya does have a criminal history. We don't know whether she was abusing the boys or not, but we also know that she had abused a young boy in the past. We know that there wasn't really evidence found in the home that indicated that he harmed his children inside his home. Plus, we think back to the witness sighting who saw the woman with 3 young boys around the same ages as the boys, looking disheveled, and in the same area around the same time that the boys went missing, and the witness heard one of the boys being called Tanner. I think this is a huge factor in the case, and it's definitely a good possibility that it really could have been them. I mean, what are the odds that 3 boys around the same age were seen with a woman around the same place and time, and one of them was called Tanner? That's very specific. And like I said, the woman didn't even know about these missing boys until later. So clearly what she saw stood out to her enough that she remembered it and then saw boys that maybe looked like them or realized that there were boys missing. One of them was named Tanner, and she's like, oh my gosh, like, this is what I just witnessed. I wonder if this could be connected. If these weren't the boys, I think this is an incredible coincidence. However, there are things that are pointing away from this theory. First of all, we know about the cryptic Facebook message where he said, "May God and Tanya forgive me." This could indicate that he did do something to the children and he was asking for forgiveness. We also know that investigators did try to track down Joanne Taylor, and they found no evidence that she even existed. Then we think to the searches done on the computer for things like breaking a neck and rat poisoning. We know that his home was found in complete shambles with broken glass and furniture everywhere, so he clearly was not in the most stable state of mind. However, we do know that John did try to take his own life, so maybe he made this Facebook post in relation to that, and that's what he was apologizing for. He knew that he was hurting her and the family by him harming himself and wanted to be forgiven by God for what he was about to do. His Facebook post doesn't come out and say anything, so we can't just assume that it meant that he harmed his kids. Next, I'm wondering if maybe the person who John gave his children to said that her name was Joanne, but it wasn't actually her name, or maybe John just straight up lied about the name so that he could divert police away from finding the person that he actually gave his children to. If you ask me, Joanne Taylor seems like a pretty basic, normal name. I guarantee you there are thousands of middle-aged white women with that same exact name, so it's something that can easily be made up like John Smith or something like that. Plus, if this really is some sort of organization that takes in abused children under the table, you have to assume that they put forth some sort of security measures. First of all, these people obviously don't want to be arrested, but beyond that, they don't want the abusers to find the children and have the kids end up back in that abusive situation. Maybe they gave John the wrong name with the purpose that no one would be able to find them. I think that's very possible. And for the Google searches, maybe John was telling the honest truth about why they were made. We know that little kids have very active imaginations, ask a million questions, and especially young boys will ask some pretty crazy questions. I know in my personal experience working with young children, the boys ask me some crazy questions about fighting and killing and shooting people and explosions and stuff like that. That's just how little boys are. So it's not crazy to me that 3 little boys watching this action karate movie will be asking crazy questions. Even if they didn't necessarily see rat poisoning in that movie, who knows what's going through a little boy's mind? I absolutely could picture 3 little boys getting all worked up and asking those questions. Then lastly, we know that there were broken items all over the house. This does look pretty bad and it clearly does show someone that's in intense distress, but we don't know when the damage was done. Maybe John realized that he just dropped his boys off with someone to take care of them. He knows that he may never see his children who he loves ever again. He thinks he's doing what's best for them, but he's clearly upset. I mean, obviously, if you're going to drop off your boys with someone because it's not something that you want to do, but you think that that's what's going to save them, it's going to make you extremely distressed, but you know it's what's best for them. That on top of his relationship failing, and at this point, he probably knows that he's going to jail for these boys' disappearance. So I could totally see this all building up and then him just taking this frustration out after he dropped the boys off when he got back home. The only thing that I questioned about the things that I just went over is one, when it comes to the questions, yes, boys will ask crazy questions like that all the time. However, I don't see why he would actually go on his computer to Google those things. I know that if little boys asked me those questions, I would just come up with my own answer and be like, no, that's not possible, or yeah, that's totally possible, or whatever. I don't see why he would actually go on Google to find out these answers. I, again, would just come up with a random answer, but maybe his sons asked him to Google it or something like that. That's very possible. Maybe, they asked him these questions, he came up with an answer, and they're like, oh, I don't believe you, go Google it or something. That is very possible. But in my opinion, all the other explanations do seem plausible, and I do think that this theory does hold some ground. If he did send them off to live in some underground foster care system, and these people genuinely believed that they were saving these boys from abuse, I could see why they wouldn't come forward. Or even if they somehow found out that they weren't abused, I still think that they wouldn't come forward for the sheer fact that they have other children that were being abused, that they don't want to be exposed, or they just don't want to go to jail. I could also see if the boys were in this type of system, why they wouldn't have come forward themselves to let everyone know that they're missing. Maybe they're not allowed to, or maybe they've been brainwashed and they think that this is what's best for them. Or maybe they were actually being abused and they're happy living with the people that they're with and they don't want to leave. There's so many possibilities within this theory that I think it actually could be possible. So the next theory is that the boys are in Florida somewhere. Now we know that John does have ties to Florida. His family lives down there. We also know that he tried to take them down there before, but he wasn't able to. We know that his family has been very outspoken and are very adamant, and they truly believe that the boys are still alive and that there's no way that John could have hurt them. Is it possible that the boys are actually with a family member down in Florida? Now, the first thing that goes against this theory is that police did track his phone records and showed that he never went any further than Ohio. From this, we know that there's obviously no way that he could have driven all the way down to Florida to bring the boys there himself. However, is it possible that when he was in Ohio, he handed the boys off to someone else who then drove them down to Florida and brought them to John's family's house? Or maybe John's family themselves met John in Ohio to pick them up. The area they went to was only a half hour away from his home, and it's a very small town, and they went in the very early hours of the morning, so it could have been the perfect place to drop them off without anyone seeing. We don't know if police actually tracked the phone records of any of the family members or how extensively they actually searched the family's home or if they searched them at all. So it may be possible that John wanted his children with people that he knew and trusted and handed them off to them. However, on the other side, I still feel like John's family in Florida, where again, he already tried to take the boys, would have been the first place that police would have searched. It seems unlikely that if John really wanted to keep the boys away from Tanya forever, that he'd hand them off to the most obvious people. But at the same time, maybe his family has just done a really good job of hiding the boys. I don't know how extensively the FBI would have searched the family's homes, but we have to assume that they probably didn't go tearing through the homes top to bottom of the families in Florida. I just don't think that they would have enough evidence to gather a warrant to search their homes. So it easily could be that they're just hiding with the family. However, on the flip side, police did not find any communication between anyone that could have indicated that this is what was happening. If John was doing something like this, you'd think that there'd be some sort of communication on the phone with at least someone. But then, on the flip side of that, we know that he was just in Florida with the boys, so maybe when he was there, they concocted this entire plan where his parents would meet them at this specific location at this specific time in Ohio. He could have made these plans in person when he realized that Tanya was coming and the walls were closing and there was nothing that he could do to keep the boys from her. He could have realized that he didn't want this electronic communication trail, so he made these plans in person when he took the boys down to Florida the first time. This does seem a little bit too perfectly planned out, but it is possible. There are so many backs and forths with this theory that I feel like the cards would have had to have been perfectly stacked and perfectly executed for this to happen, so I just don't really know how likely this theory is. The next major theory is that John harmed his children because he knew that his wife was about to leave him, and he thought that the best way to get back at her and hurt her was to take her children and then taking his own life. Literally getting rid of everyone that she loves. Maybe after doing this, his plan was to take his own life to hurt Tanya further, or maybe he just felt so guilty after harming his children that he decided to take his own life because of that. Maybe it was more of a snap decision. So one of the first things that points to this theory is that according to Tanya, he was really trying to get back together with her and making things work, but she was just rejecting him. If this is true, it makes me think of two things. One, your wife of 10 years is rejecting you flat out, and it could make you have some sort of complete breakdown that would make you lash out. But then I also think if your wife has been abusing your children for the past 9 years, why would you want to stay together as a family so badly? Why would you be begging to be a family again, begging to be back with her? If she was abusing his children so bad that he wanted to take them away forever, why would he try so desperately to get back together with her and have the children back in that situation? Next, we point to the broken furniture and the glass in the house, which, as I said earlier, points to a very distressed and broken man. How would he have thought out this entire plan so perfectly to send his children off and then execute it perfectly while his mental health was very clearly deteriorating? I feel like if you're going to pull something off like that, it takes a great deal of clear thinking and focus. Then again, we go back to the searches on his computer. We know the explanations for them that he came up with, but we know that he just could be lying, and this could just be a convenient answer that he came up with. What if he searched rat poison, then made his children their favorite foods because one, he knew that it would be their last days on earth, and two, because he knew that his kids would scarf down their food and they would easily poison them and they would ingest plenty of poison because it was their favorite meal. I think that that is very possible. We know that his whole life was crashing down, and again, if we believe Tanya, he had the history of the same exact thing happening to him in his previous relationship, where his wife left him, got the kids, and he was just left out. If the wife he loved very much was leaving him and threatening to take the children, I don't think it's very far-fetched to believe that he lashed out, wanted to hurt her in the same way that she was hurting him. But again, just like with the last theories, you kind of have to just take someone's word for it. In the last theory, we would have just had to have believed John. In this theory, we would just have to take Tanya's word for it. We don't know 100% if he really was begging to get back together with her. It's possible that she was just saying that to prove her point that he must have hurt the children. Maybe she was spinning this story because she felt guilty. Maybe she was abusing the children. Maybe she realized that maybe that's why they were taken away. So she wanted to make it seem like she was a great mother and he wanted to get back together with her so that, it would divert the attention from that. Either way though, again, I don't want to make excuses for him taking the children. I just think that maybe that's what was going through her mind. Now, I don't necessarily think that Tanya is trying to spin a story or hinder the investigation for her children, but I think it's very possible that she said those things to make her point stronger that he may have hurt the children, to make them look into this case more. I don't think that she knows where the children are. I don't think that she's trying to disrupt the investigation, but maybe she was trying to say this because she didn't want anything to be pointed towards her. We also just kind of have to take Tanya's word that she wasn't hurting her children. I don't know if there's any situation where if she was hurting her children that she would admit it, even if it did help the investigation. Again, even if it would help the investigation, I don't think that she would admit to abusing her children because she probably knows that she wouldn't get her children back if they did find them, if she was abusing them. So again, it's basically just who do you want to believe? At the end of the day, the only hard facts that we have is that the boys are gone. John went to Ohio and back that morning, and the house was a mess when they searched it, and they have suspicious computer searches. That's pretty much it. So at this point, you kind of just have to decide for yourself who you believe, which is where I'm really stuck. I don't know if I want to believe that this mother who seems absolutely devastated about her missing children could actually be an abuser. But I also don't want to believe that this once loving, caring father killed his 3 children just to get back at his wife. But again, we know that both cases are very unfortunately possible. Personally, I think that a lot of signs point to John actually sending his children off with people who are taking care of them in an underground foster system somewhere. This may just be the optimist in me, but I do think that a lot of signs point to that. But at the same time, I ask myself, how did he get in contact with these people? I can't imagine that it's easy to find this underground child care system without leaving any sort of trace behind. I also ask myself, why? If Tanya wasn't abusing these boys, what other reason would he have for sending them off? Maybe he really did just want to get revenge at his wife, so he sent them off somewhere that they would never be found instead of just straight up killing them. It's very possible that he just wanted to hurt his wife in any way possible without hurting his children. But at the same time, we know that when the walls are closing in and you feel like you have nothing to lose, some people just snap, and he clearly did, whether he hurt his children or not. Did he tear apart his home because he just gave his children to these random people, knowing he'd go to jail, knowing he'd never see them? Or did he tear apart his home in a rage-fueled fit of violence where he may have hurt the children or was trying to cover up what he did to the children? I think the fact that there's absolutely no evidence of him hurting the children in the home is a sign that points to him not killing them. You have to think that if he poisoned his children, they probably would have thrown up and gotten sick. There would have been a mess. I think that there would have been evidence of some sort of cleanup somewhere. If he did tear apart the home to cover up some sort of evidence, I still think that investigators would have at least found some sort of evidence that he was trying to very clearly hide. This case is one that really leaves me with no definite answer of what I personally believe. Again, there's not a lot of information in this case besides what each person is saying. We don't know their motives for anything that they say. We don't truly know the family history or the history of John and Tanya's marriage. We just don't really know anything at all. All we can really do is make up different theories based off what they're saying, which is honestly kind of dangerous. We could be completely way off in our theories, and it could be something so out of the blue that no one thought of because we simply chose to believe what each person is saying. Maybe both of them are just straight up lying about everything. Maybe they're both telling the truth. We don't know. I just really hope that we get closure on this case very soon. These boys have been missing for almost 9 years, and that means that Andrew is almost 18 years old. I'm hoping that if he is out there somewhere, he definitely has memories of his mom and dad, and maybe he'll come forward and show his true identity. Otherwise, I'm hoping that by spreading awareness to this case, that someone may recognize them and bring them home. Here is an age progression photo of what they look like right now. There has been a $60,000 reward for any information leading to finding the boys. if you do have any information, no matter how big or small you think it might be, I urge you to call the MORENCI police at 517-458-7104, which will be listed in the description below. Their mother deserves to know what happened to her 3 young boys, and these boys deserve to have their stories heard and to hopefully be found. Again, if you have absolutely any information or tips, please call the number in the description. So that is pretty much all of the information and theories I have on this case. At this point, I'm very curious what you guys think. Do you think the boys are out there somewhere? Do you think that John is telling the truth? Or do you think he sent them off just to get back at Tanya? Or do you believe that these boys aren't even alive at all? Please let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Don't forget to follow my Twitter and Instagram. Both will be linked in the description box below. Also, if you have any questions for my 10K Q&A, make sure to head over to the community post or my Instagram to go ahead and ask those questions. If you have any case suggestions, please shoot me an email at RachelShannonCases@gmail.com. Pretty much every case that I've been covering have been suggestions from you guys, including this one, so I truly appreciate you guys sending me cases that you're passionate about and that you want to see me cover. I read every single case suggestion that I get, so please don't be afraid to send your suggestion over. So with that, I hope you guys have a great week, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!